All right, let's talk about one of the most challenging scenarios we face in medicine, the patient with altered mental status. The history is often non-existent, the physical exam is limited, and the list of possible causes feels a mile long. So my goal here is to give you a rock-solid, pathophysiology-based framework so you can approach these patients with confidence and precision. On this channel, we really dig into the pathophysiology behind the things we see every day in the hospital. This is a high-yield summary of my full-length lecture on altered mental status, and it's designed to give you a structured approach that you can actually use at the bedside. Okay, let's dive right in. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to get really precise about what we mean by altered mental status. Then, we'll ground ourselves in the basic neuroanatomy of consciousness. You have to know normal to understand abnormal. After that, we'll get into the clinical evaluation, focusing on why the history is your absolute best friend, how to decode the timeline, and finally, we'll put it all together with 5 main categories of causes. Okay, first things first, and this is probably the most important point I'm going to make. Altered mental status is a symptom, not a diagnosis. It's like a fever or chest pain. Our job isn't just to label it, our job is to find the cause. And that process starts by using precise language to describe what we're seeing. Being precise here is absolutely critical. We have to distinguish between changes in the level of consciousness versus changes in the content of consciousness. So things like lethargy, stupor, and coma, that's a spectrum of arousal. The patient is progressively less arousable. Delirium, on the other hand, is different. That's an acute confusional state, a problem with attention and cognition. Just making this initial distinction can dramatically narrow your differential. So to really understand the pathology, we've got to master the physiology first. Let's peel back the layers and look at the actual neuroanatomy that keeps us conscious. So what is it? What are the actual structures in the brain that are responsible for keeping us awake, alert, and aware of the world? It turns out it's a beautifully organized system, an axis, really. And here it is, the axis of awareness. It all begins deep in the brainstem, in a structure called the ascending reticular activating system, or the ARS. Think of this as the ignition switch. It generates the fundamental signal for wakefulness. From there, that signal travels up to the thalamus, which acts like a central relay station. And finally, the thalamus projects those signals out to both sides of the cerebral cortex. That's where awareness, cognition, and our interaction with the world actually happen. Now, why does this anatomy matter so much clinically? Well, it's all about real estate. The ARS and the thalamus are incredibly dense structures packed into a very small area. That means even a tiny lesion, like a small brainstem stroke, can completely knock out the system and cause a coma. The cortex, on the other hand, is spread out. So to get a coma from a cortical problem, you need massive, widespread bilateral dysfunction. Think global anoxia or a huge stroke causing so much swelling that it affects the other hemisphere. Okay, now that we have the physiology down, let's pivot back to the bedside. The workup obviously involves a history, a good neuro exam, and lab testing. But I want to argue that one of these is way more powerful than the others. And honestly, I cannot overstate this. A good history is your single most powerful diagnostic tool. If you skip this part and just jump to ordering tests, you're going to be chasing your tail, shotgunning labs and scans. The answer is almost always in the story. But wait. How do you get a history from a patient who can't talk to you? Well, you become a detective. You have to find your sources. You talk to family members, any bystanders who were there, and definitely the EMS crew who brought them in. These people are your witnesses. And if no one's around, don't be afraid to look through the patient's phone for emergency contacts. The information you get from them is often worth more than any lab value or CT scan result. So, when you're a plain detective, what are the key pieces of information you're trying to uncover? It really boils down to asking the right questions to build a timeline and find those critical clues. First and foremost, you have to establish a time course. When was the patient last seen at their baseline? Was the onset absolutely sudden, like a light switch? That should make you think of vascular events, a stroke, a subarachnoid hemorrhage, or maybe a toxic ingestion. Or was it more gradual, developing over hours to days? That points more towards things like an infection or a slowly worsening metabolic problem. And if it's fluctuating, coming and going, that is classic for things like delirium or maybe seizures. The tempo tells you so much. Next, you need to know about any events that happened right before the mental status changed. Were there fevers? That screams infection, maybe sepsis or meningitis. What about a sudden severe headache? You got to worry about an intracranial bleed. Any new weakness on one side? Falls? Witnessed seizure activity? Each one of these is a powerful clue that points you down a different diagnostic path. And finally, you have to understand the patient's baseline. Context is everything. Do they have liver cirrhosis, which makes them a setup for high ammonia levels? Are they a diabetic, raising the possibility of hypoglycemia? And you absolutely have to do a deep dive on their medications. New drugs, stopping old drugs, or just the accumulation of a medication due to kidney or liver failure. These are incredibly common culprits.
Okay, I know that's a lot of information to try and process, especially when you're in a stressful situation. So, to keep your thoughts organized and make sure you don't miss anything big, we can use a simple, systematic framework.
This right here is your mental model. I want you to burn this into your brain. Pretty much anything that can cause altered mental status by messing with that ARS, thalamic cortical axis, will fall into one of these 5 buckets: drugs, structural brain problems, sepsis, organ dysfunction, and seizures. Running through this list on every patient is your safety net. And this just shows you the breadth within each category. Drugs could be an overdose, but it could also be withdrawal or a medication side effect. Structural lesions include things like trauma, strokes, or tumors. Sepsis can be from a UTI or pneumonia, or a direct brain infection like meningitis. Organ dysfunction is huge. This covers all the metabolic encephalopathies, right? Hypoglycemia, uremia from kidney failure, hyperammonemia from liver failure. All of these toxins build up and disrupt normal brain function. And of course, the patient could be having a seizure or just be in that sleepy postictal state. Before we wrap up, I want to give you one more clinical pearl. And trust me, this one is gold. After you've gone through all your systematic questions, just ask the family a very simple, open-ended question. What do you think is going on here? You would be amazed how often their intuition is right on the money. It can save you a lot of time. So, to bring it all home, remember, altered mental status is just a symptom. Our job is to be a detective and find the cause. Consciousness depends on that ARAS thalamic cortical axis being intact. The history is, without a doubt, your most powerful tool. Always establish a timeline, sudden, gradual, or fluctuating. And finally, use that Big 5 framework to build a systematic, comprehensive differential diagnosis for every single patient. For those of you who want a more comprehensive discussion, where we get into the details of the neurological exam and specific treatment approaches, my full-length lectures are available. You can find the links to those in the description below. Thanks so much for watching.